Grover? It looks okay, but are you sure you're supposed to paint the apple like that?
No, you're not supposed to. You're supposed to paint on paper. Here's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to copy the apple and paint it on paper. You just put me in your painty position right now.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tank.
It's okay, but next time don't take things so literally, all right?
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, don't paint the apple. It is not going to taste good. Understand? Yeah, we're gonna paint the apple on paper today, okay? So littles, parents, why don't you come over to the table with me and we'll go over all the supplies that you're gonna need for painting the apple. Right this way. All right, well, here we are at the table with all of our supplies, and I've got my boys, Benjamin and Silas, and they're gonna help show them to you. Okay, so one of the first things that we're gonna need is the paper towel. Silas, where's the paper towel? Paper towel is very, very handy. It helps to clean up messes and brushes and water and paint and any of those spills that might occur while we are painting. So it'd be good to have some paper towel. All right, second thing we're gonna need watercolor paper. Silas, can you point to the watercolor paper, please? That's right. Now, watercolor paper is not thin paper. It is thicker, a little bit thicker, and that just helps to absorb the water. So you can get this at any art store, and that will be just golden for watercolor paper. Okay, now, Benjamin, we need some brushes. Where are the brushes? That's right. Now, Benjamin's got 3 brushes right there, and you'll notice that they're kind of round, and you can just use basic brushes. They can be synthetic. Any small, large, any size will do, but probably for the apple, maybe smaller might be a little bit better. But round brushes like that will be just fine. And then, number 4, we're gonna need some paint. Benjamin, show them the paint. That's right. Now that paint is in a pan, but you can also get watercolor paint in a tube as well and just squeeze it out on the paper, and that will be just fine. And again, you can get that at any art store, watercolor paint. It will be labeled. And last but not least, we have our water. And you can't do watercolor paint without water. That's right, Silas, there's the water. And you can use any old container to put it in. Just make sure that the water's clean. And once you have that, then you will have all the supplies that you need for painting the apple. So if you're all set with that, let's get going. Okay, so once you have all of those supplies all ready and set, then we can go right ahead and start painting our apple. Now, we're gonna start out very, very simple. In fact, we might do a few different apple shapes. So what I'm gonna do right now is I'm just gonna get my brush nice and wet. So I've got my water right there, so I'm just getting my brush nice and wet, and I'm just pulling it off just a little bit so it's not gonna drip everywhere. And littles, you probably noticed that your apple is very, very red. So I'm gonna pull some red onto my brush, okay? Now, the one thing different I am going to do when we're making the apple shape, which is going to be a very rough circle, is we're not going to do the whole circle all the way around. We're going to do it a little bit differently. So what I want you to do is take your brush and just do a half circle, okay? Just about there. And then what you're going to do is you're going to sort of pull the color across, okay? And as you go, you're kind of going to fill in your circle. Now, if at any point you need to pause the video and do this yourself, that is completely fine as well. Take all the time you need to do this. But the reason it's a little bit easier to do it this way is because watercolor, when it dries really quickly, it dries light. Okay, and it dries very lightly, and then you have to reapply different colors in order to darken it up. So if you were to draw a very rough or a very hard line all the way around, and then if you went back and started fiddling with your water and your colors and all that stuff, and then you went back and applied the water again, the color you already put down would have dried already. So you would end up with a very hard line. So I'll show you an example actually. So if I were to go all the way around like this, like that, okay? And then if I were to leave that to dry for a while, and then I go back in here and I start fiddling with my colors and all that kind of thing while this is drying, by the time I go back and start perhaps putting in some more colors, you maybe notice that it's not showing up very well here, unfortunately, but there's a little bit more of a line there than there would be if you pulled it across the other way. So anyway, just a little tip for when you're doing watercolor, which is why I did it this way. I've just pulled the color across. So I'm just going to finish this one since I already got it started. Now, one of the things you probably observed about your apple in the last video was that there was a little bit of a shine where the light was hitting the apple. Okay, so I've just left a white spot. So a white spot on this one and a white spot on that one. And that just shows where the light is reflecting off of it. All right, so while we're keeping the surface of this one very wet, we're gonna add a few more colors. Now, if you remember, it was dark. So if the light is hitting this side of your apple right here, it's going to be dark on this side. So I'm gonna add a little bit of purple, I think, to my apple just for fun. And we're just gonna very gently dot it in. Now, when the surface is still wet, the color will spread very quickly. I think I'm gonna add just a little bit more paint. It's a little bit too watery for me, I think. Just a little bit more, just around this side. And you can get some very cool effects when you're just gently dotting in your colors like that. Now I'm gonna do the same thing on this one, although where we talked about watercolor drying really quickly, I think this one has dried. So the effect isn't gonna work out exactly the way I want it to with this one. But that's okay, we'll just let that dry and I'll show you something different with that one. But while this bottom one is still wet, we're gonna continue to add color and add water. And you can really have a lot of fun with this. You can experiment with different colors. You can kind of add in, I'm gonna add in some orange just for fun, see what that looks like. And it can be fun because sometimes you might try a color and it'll be like, oh, that didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. That was kind of makes some interesting color that I'm not quite too sure about. And that's okay, to be quite honest, because it's through the trial and error of trying different things that you kind of find out what works and what doesn't work. So at least I find it kind of fun. So don't get frustrated if it doesn't turn out exactly the way you want the first time around. Remember, there are many different shapes of apples, there are many different colors of apples. So littles, I know I have a perfectionist in my house, and he would get a little bit upset if the apple wasn't a perfect circle or things like that. But don't get frustrated with that, because to be honest, no apple is a perfect circle. There's always going to be some lumpy, odd-shaped apples, so don't beat yourself up about that. Now, I've added some blue, and I think I may have added just a little bit too much. But what I'm doing is I'm just very gently trying to move it around a little bit. The paper is still very wet, and I'm just moving it around to get a little bit more of a shadow on this side. Okay, now when you're working with wet paint, and watercolors, you don't want to scrub really, really hard. Because if you start scrubbing really, really hard, you end up blending the colors and you end up making it more of a muddier color than you maybe intend. So just when you're adding in colors, just very lightly, you want to touch your brush in. Okay, and we'll keep that white spot right there because that's a very, very nice shine. But you notice how the color kind of bleeds into the other colors a little bit. And it makes kind of a fun, I think, a fun effect. Now you might choose to add some yellow into your apple. You might choose to do a green apple. Green can be really fun. In fact, let's just for fun, you know, because since we're in the mood right now, let's just try a green apple because I know there's lots of green apples. So I'm going to take some very, very bright green, I think, and let's just see how this turns out. So again, we're going to do our, oh, that's kind of light half circle, and we're just going to, once again, fill it in as we go around our circle. Now you don't have to add the shine if you don't want to, but feel free to do so. I'm just going to do kind of similar to what I had before, and this apple is turning out to be very large and rather lumpy, but that is completely fine. I've seen some pretty weirdly shaped apples. So there we go. I'm just going to add, in fact, I think I might make the shine a little bit smaller. There we go. All right, now again, while that paper is still wet, we're going to continue adding in some colors. Let's add in the blue again. Let's just see what happens. So that's kind of fun. You get a nice shadow on that side. Again, very, very light with the brush. You just want to very gently dab it all in. There we go. And look how that all bleeds in like that. I think I'd rather like that, actually. I'm going to add in a little bit of yellow. I think it already is a little bit of a yellowish green anyway, but I'm going to add in just a little bit more and just see what happens. This is a bit of a darker yellow, and you can let it kind of bleed into the white patch you got there too, and just see what happens. So all that to say, just experiment. Once again, littles, just have fun with this. I mean, you can add any color that you want, really. Any color that you remember observing in your apple. You can add, like I did, like blues and purples and reds, and there are, if you look really carefully like we did last time, remember how we were observant and we were looking at all the different colors and the shapes and the textures? You can see a lot of different shades and a lot of different things. It's not just a red apple. So have fun, experiment, throw in different colors. I mean, I'm going to throw in an orange right here, and this could be kind of weird, but hey, who knows? There might be kind of an orangey, greenish apple out there. That might be kind of, oh, and you ended up getting a little bit of a splotchy look. I'm just gonna move that color around just a little bit and just see what happens. And again, very, very lightly with the brush so it doesn't turn into mud. I kind of like how this is looking, so I'm not gonna touch that too much, I don't think. I'm just gonna kind of move this around and see how the color kind of bleeds in a little bit. Yeah, I think that looks a little bit fun. New and exciting apple shapes. There we go. So we got 3 apples. Now the other thing you can do, if your paper is already dry, like this one up here, that's okay. You can always paint over it. You can always add more colors over top of it. So I'm still going to add in yeah, let's add in some blue because we're in the blue mood. So again, you're not going to have the same kind of bleeding effect because the paper is dry, but you can still add the darker color right over top, just like that. And it won't bleed as much, but we can still dampen our brush once again and kind of pull the color in a little bit like that. Okay, so you can still get the nice dark shadow on the one side. Now the one thing, once again about watercolor, if you want a light part, like this light part right here, if you want it to stay white, you want to try not to paint it white, because once you start painting color over top of it, now there are some techniques you can use to get it to go back to mostly white, but the color does kind of stain, or can stained the paper. So it was very, very hard to get watercolor back to plain white. So your best bet is probably just to leave it white, at least until you're sure that you want that color white, and then you can always add different colors later. But it's hard to get a color like this back to white once it's dry without ruining the picture. Man, I really like that one. That's really, really fun. I think I might add a little bit more blue to it, just to see. Oh, I love that. I actually really like that orange. I'm very pleasantly surprised by that, actually. To add a little bit more interest than just your typical red. And of course my problem is I get really, really excited sometimes and then I go too fast and then I start ruining it. So I'm just gonna leave it right there for right now. Now, what was one of the things that we noticed on the top of our apple? It was a stem last time, right? So we're gonna add a stem. So most stems of apples, I suppose, are brown or black. I'm gonna use black just because it'll add a nice contrast, especially to this one down here. But we're just gonna add a little stem just to the top there, just a little one. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing to this one. Now, if the apple is still wet, then if your wet stem, the paint from your wet stem touches the apple, it's gonna bleed into your apple. So if you want that, that's cool. If you don't want that, maybe wait either till the apple part is dry, or just don't touch it with the stem, and yeah, that will work too. All right, so you got a bit more of a reddish apple, you got kind of a purplish reddish apple, and then you got a green, orange, and kind of fun yellowy kind of apple down there. So you can do these, start with any color you want, really. I mean, you can start with yellow, choose any color you want. Now, one of the things I sometimes like to do, just to create a little bit of more interest, is I like to add a table or something underneath of it. Now, I'm not going to add a table to all three of these. I think I might just add it to the bottom one, just so that you can get an idea of what that might look like. But if the apple is sitting on the table, then you might have something underneath. So I'm going to add just a little bit of brown underneath this one. And again, I'm not going to touch the apple because it's still a little bit on the wet side, so I don't want to bleed brown into my very nice apple there. So I'm just going to put one side of the table right here, and then I'm going to wet my brush. So again, I'm rinsing off the color and I'm just pulling the brush off like that, just to make it so it's not dripping everywhere. And then I'm just going to touch the bottom of it and see how the color bleeds into where the water is, and just kind of makes the table kind of disappear just a little bit, but just gives a suggestion of one. All right, and then I'm going to try to do the same thing on the other side. It's darker on this side, so I'm going to add a bit more of a darker brown to it again, and try not to touch the table, touch the apple with my brush, at least at this point. And I'm going to add a little bit more water to it, not too much. I suppose you don't want it to be too drippy, but just enough to kind of fade the table out, to give a suggestion of a table. So there we go. We have the apple sitting on a table. Now you can add more colors to the table if you want. You can, I don't know, maybe if you wanted to add the colors of the apple into the table, because if you do observe an apple on a table sometimes, if it's in the right light, you'll notice that the colors of the apple, if it's a clear surface, will actually reflect in certain tables. So I think, just for fun, I might try and add just maybe just a touch of orange. Now, this is me being adventurous because I have no idea how this is gonna look, but sometimes it just pays just to be adventurous and not caring about being perfect or anything, but just to have a little bit of fun with it. I'm gonna add just a little bit more yellow on this side. Ooh, I mean, it's a little bit too much, I think. That's okay. And then again, just adding just a little bit more water just to fade it out. know. What do you think? That's kind of fun. Anyway, but it would be darker on this side and lighter on this side. Now, one of the kind of fun things you can do, and if you have your paper towel, it's not just meant for cleaning stuff up, but what you can do is if a surface is really, really damp and you want to try and take it back to white, you can take the paper towel and you can just dab it like that. See how I brought that back a little bit? Just make it a little bit of a brighter color. Yeah, so if you want to bring back the color just a little bit to more white, you can do that when the paper is still damp. All right, so there you have it. You have 3 apples. Now, they might not look exactly like mine. Yours might be different colors, but that's okay, because as I said, all apples are different, and God is a very creative God, and He creates so many unique and beautiful things, and we couldn't possibly imagine anything more creative than what He can. And so this is just so cool to be able to try and attempt to interpret something that He has created. So anyway, I hope that was fun for you. And again, feel free to carry on after this video is done with more apples, and you can even try like other pieces of fruit as well, just with that very simple technique of just making your shape and then gently adding in your colors. And if you want to keep on going and try other kinds of fruit like pears or bananas or different things like that, feel free to try that as well. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll hopefully be putting up another lesson at some point. But for now, enjoy painting, have lots of fun. And littles, if your parents weren't here for you at this point in time, make sure you show them as well, and maybe they can spend an afternoon painting with you and doing that as well. So, happy painting, and we will see you in the next lesson.